Hey kitchen besties, welcome back to the Floral Apron. If you have been wondering how to make French macarons, you are in good hands. Today I'm going to show you my step-by-step process for vanilla macarons. I won't go so far to say that it's foolproof because I don't think such a thing exists. Macarons are very technically difficult pastries that have frustrated bakers around the world for centuries, but they have a lot more wiggle room than you might think. My whole goal for this video today is to help uncomplicate and demystify macarons so that you feel comfortable taking them on in your kitchen. Let's get started. The recipe I'm going to be using today is from my website at floralapron.com. I have this specific one for vanilla macarons linked in the description. I recognize I'm probably one of the very few 20-somethings that prefers to have a printed copy of a recipe, but there's just something about being able to hold it in my hands and make notes on it with a pen or pencil that, I don't know, sue me. All right, let me move these babies out of the way and we'll get going. First things first is I always like to prep my equipment. I line all of my baking sheets with my silicone macaron mats. I have found that silicone mats result in a much rounder, more circular cookie. Sometimes the parchment paper can kind of spread the macaron batter and you won't get perfect circles. But if you're not sure if you want to make macarons consistently, parchment paper is a great place to start. If you find that you like making macarons and you want to invest in some more specialized equipment, I have all of the tools and equipment that I'm using in my Amazon storefront, which is also linked in the description. If you purchase something through one of those affiliate links, it goes a long way to support me, so thank you in advance, but please don't feel obligated. And then my next step is to prep my piping bag. I use this beautiful bright green cup. It's the perfect size for filling my piping bags. I pop my number 10, I think it's number 10. 12. Number 12 tip into my piping bag, and I fold over the end here and then pop it into my cup here so that you have the tip pointed upward. That will stop any batter from flowing out before you want it to. Now that I have these prepped, I'm gonna put them away. Ooh, did you see that? Close one. And then I will start weighing my ingredients. And if you know anything about me, you know that I hate washing dishes, so I do everything that I can to limit the amount of dishes that I have in my recipes. Macarons are one of my favorites because while they are particular, they require very few dishes. Part of that is because I weigh all of my ingredients, and so I don't have to use extra measuring bowls. But the other reason that you want to weigh your ingredients is because macarons are so particular that you want to reduce as many variables as possible. And making sure that you have consistent weights of ingredients is a great way to get rid of one of those variables every single time you bake them. I'm going to weigh out my dry ingredients. And I usually start with the almond flour because that's what is the chunkiest. And the more that you can get rid of any of these lumps, the smoother your macaron shells are gonna turn out. And then, so I pour in my almond flour after zeroing out. I pour in my powdered sugar. Okay. And already I only have a spoon and my food processor rather than 2 spoons and 2 bowls and my food processor. So already we're winning. This is my Cuisinart Custom 14 food processor that I got last year at Black Friday. My next video is going to be a full review with pros and cons about it. Please consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell to make sure you don't miss when it comes out. It's really important not to over-process your almond flour and powdered sugar. It's kind of hard to over-process it, so don't be too worried about it. If you use the pulse rather than the on button, you're gonna be fine. I usually pulse 8 to 10 times until I can see that the almond flour and the powdered sugar have combined completely. And that looks really good. And this gives us a really nice, super fine consistency that will make really smooth shell tops. If you don't have a food processor, it is possible to get good macarons just with sifting, but I recommend doing it a couple of times to make sure you get all those big pieces out. I'm gonna put this aside, and we are done with the food processor, so it's gonna go back into my cabinets. And then it is time for mixing. Now these eggs are fresh from the fridge. A lot of macaron bakers will use aged egg whites, but I have not found that to be necessary to get good macarons. Aged egg whites can help if you're a beginner, same for room temperature egg whites, but I personally have not found it to make that big of a difference in the overall result. Perhaps it's just me, perhaps it's just this recipe, but I find it a lot easier and more convenient to use eggs fresh from the fridge rather than having to separate them the day before and leave them in the fridge, because that requires planning in advance. And sometimes I wake up and I think I want to make macarons this morning. I'm always pretty careful to keep the yolk intact. It's a lot easier to tell if you get any yolks in the bowl. I've been able to make meringue with a little bit of yolk in the mix. I don't recommend that it's the best way to do it, but it is possible. You don't have to throw out 3 egg whites worth if it has just a little bit of yolk in it. Try to get it out with the shell and you'll be fine. So at 2 eggs, I'm at 72 grams and I'm looking for 120. Right now I am at 107, so I will crack into that third one. And it's gonna be more than 120. Yeah, we are at 130. So I'm going to just put the rest of the egg white in this bowl here, transfer my egg yolk to this container, and trash my shells. But then I'm gonna scoop out a little bit of egg white and put it in a container for the fridge for later. I want to make sure that I have 120 grams in this bowl. I guess I can use the apron, but that just has never felt right to me. If you just want to throw 20 grams of egg whites down the drain, go for it. Just sometimes it's hard to make sure that you only have small pieces come out. You can see I've got some pretty big clumps, and if one of those falls out, you can easily go under that 120 mark and have to crack open another egg. 123. It really helps if you are as consistent as possible. 120. The last step is to get my granulated sugar weighed out. Do not add this right away. Your meringue will form best if you start to whip the egg whites by themselves until they get frothy, and then slowly sprinkle in your granulated sugar. I've found that the best method for making a stable French meringue, because it is uncooked, to start really slowly and slowly increase the speed to make sure that all of those meringue bubbles inside there are acclimating properly. Starting slow is the more foolproof option to make sure that your meringue is strong despite it being uncooked. So I'm gonna start on 2 and then increase the speed to 4 once I notice a lot of little bubbles gathering around the whisk tines. I'm seeing a lot of little bubbles around the sides, so I'm going to increase my speed to 4 and start sprinkling in my granulated sugar. It's starting to turn white and my bubbles are getting even smaller, so I'm going to increase my speed to 6. If I pick up my meringue right now, I'm just a little softer than Soft Peaks because you can see the meringue starting to take shape, but it doesn't clump up in the whisk and it falls off the whisk really easily. Now I can see the whisk starting to leave indentations in past indentations, so that's a sign for me to start testing to see where we're at. I always swirl the whisk around the bowl and then pick up so I get the most accurate representation of the total meringue. We're at Soft Peaks because you can see that this little top part is still moving quite a bit. And the meringue in the bowl started to lean over just like this. If you want to add flavoring or gel color, this is a great time to do so. As you can see, this video is sponsored by Trader Joe's. Kidding, I wish. My favorite vanilla to use in macarons is their organic vanilla bean paste, but it is only available during the holidays, so I stock up to make sure that I have it all year round. But they recently started stocking their bourbon vanilla bean paste, which is about half the price. Well, it's the same price, but it's double the amount. There are fewer vanilla beans per teaspoon, but the flavor overall is pretty good. And then if you don't want to splurge on vanilla bean paste, you can always use vanilla extract. I'm gonna add half a teaspoon of the organic vanilla bean paste. And you can eyeball this if you are confident, but again, that adds in another variable and we want as much consistency as possible. Turn these to their state of honor. And then I'm gonna add in 2 drops of pink food coloring. Because this is a meringue, you cannot use liquid food coloring or oil-based food coloring. It has to be gel or powder, otherwise the meringue may not turn out. So there are my 2 drops. And then I am going to keep whisking at 8 until I get stiff peaks. Okay, we're looking good. You can see that this meringue is now clumping in the whisk, and this isn't quite straight up, but it's getting better. This in the bowl is going really high up and then curving over. So we're getting really close, probably only another 30 seconds to a minute. And the nice thing about vanilla bean paste is that you can see the little speckles of vanilla beans throughout the meringue. I don't know, it just makes me happy. Look at that. So we've got it sticking pretty much straight up. It wants to go sideways, but I can manipulate it to go straight up. It's sticking straight up in my bowl, so we are set to add our dry ingredients. Because we are done with the mixer for now, I'm gonna move it out of the way. This is the most important part of making macarons. Okay, well maybe the meringue is. I would say it's tied for first. The whole process of folding your dry ingredients into your meringue is called the macaronage. I start by adding half of my dry ingredients to the bowl and then folding in a very specific way. This is my favorite spoonula, and I run it around the sides of the bowl and then straight down the center. However, right in the beginning, when you want to incorporate all of the dry ingredients, I find that you don't have to be quite as particular. If you're a beginner and you're really worried about over macaronaging, you can absolutely just do around the edges and then straight down the center. But I find that I get less hollow macarons if I'm a lot more violent in the beginning. Maybe it's to help take out your anger in advance in case they don't turn out. Once I get all of that combined, you can already see that this is pretty thick. So I'm gonna fold in the last half of my dry ingredients. Again, violent at the start, but once I see that it's pretty much all combined, I wipe down my spatula to make sure that I get all of this in the mix, and then start to do my around the edges and down the center. I usually pop it by this little section on my hip and hold my spatula steady while I rotate the bowl with my left hand. That just cuts down some of the delt work, and if you're like me and trained chest and shoulders yesterday, it really helps. Don't worry too much about an extra 2 or 3 folds, you will be fine. It's when you get to the point where you don't see any definition between what just fell in and the rest of the batter that is where you start getting into trouble. As long as you can still see some definition, your macarons more likely than not will still turn out okay. You can see that it flows slowly off of my spatula for quite a while and then breaks off into ribbons. I want another 2 or 3 folds just to give it a little extra. You can also press the batter against the sides of the bowl. That also will help reduce some of the air in the batter as well. And now I have a nice long ribbon that only started to break right at the end, and it's starting to fade really nicely back into the batter. So I'm gonna say this is macaronage, and I'm gonna transfer it into my piping bag. It is always better to slightly under macaronage than slightly over macaronage. That is a hill that I will die on. So it's very important to scrape the sides and bottom of your bowl. I'm gonna pour it into my bag here. And you labored over this batter, okay? You made the meringue, you folded in the dry ingredients to perfection, so we want to get as many macarons out of it as possible. So scrape the sides, scrape the bottom. All right, I'm happy with that. Fold over your piping bag so that this is no longer exposed to air. And this recipe makes about 30 filled macarons, which equates to 60 shells. But I find that I usually have 10 or so extra, so I always prep a third baking mat just in case I have a little bit of overflow. That way I don't have to scramble trying to stop macaron batter from flowing out of my piping bag while I get a third sheet done. If you want a few more angles or a little bit extra guidance, I have a short video in my macaron playlist, so if this video is not enough or you're still interested in learning more, please check out that resource as well. So I've twisted the top of my bag here to help prevent air from escaping that way. All of my macaron batter is gonna flow straight down. I'm gonna keep my bag perpendicular to the trays. It's possible to stop in the middle of piping, but it's a little tricky, so I just recommend not, if possible. Here we go. Hold directly over this little point here, pipe until I get to the inner circle, and then stop putting pressure with my right hand. Pull up quickly and give a little twist to stop the flow of batter. I'm not putting any pressure with my left hand. This is all my right hand. My left hand is just for guidance to make sure that I stay right over that center dot. And we're on here. So I always start in the center row and then work my way out. And you can see that the macarons that I piped before have started to lose some of that definition, but they do still have little bumps on them. That will usually go away during our next step, but if it doesn't, I'll tell you how to fix that too. I can feel that I only have a couple left. Okay, so now that we have all of these piped, they look really good. Now our next step is getting any smaller air bubbles out. The traditional method is to bang it on the counter. And that kind of hurts everyone in a mile radius's eardrums. So what I like to do instead, bang my fist against the bottom in a couple different sections, and you'll see that it's caused air bubbles to pop, and the top is now totally flat as opposed to the little ripples that you see on this side. So I'm gonna do the same over here. And you can see a lot of air bubbles just popped out of this because they were in the middle of the batter and the banging caused them to rise up to the top of the macaron. And then if you see that there are still little divots from those bubbles, I like to grab a toothpick and just kind of swirl around the section to even it out so that you don't get little divots when they bake later. Now, if you've piped these and you still have little nipples on the top, you can dip your finger in a little bit of water and wipe it off so it's just damp, and then lightly press each little top until it fades back into the rest of the batter. This step is mostly optional. If you don't care if there are a couple little divots on the tops of your shells, don't bother using a scribe or a toothpick. These are gonna dry for 25 to 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour, depending on how humid it is in your home. To help speed this process up, I have this little fan that my mother-in-law gifted me, and it's surprisingly very powerful. So I set it up right along the side here so that it gets all three of them. This extra airflow helps the tops of the macaron to dry out faster, and we want them to be totally dry by the time we bake. If they are not totally dry by the time we put them in the oven, the air that is inside the rest of the macaron will expand with heat and it'll go straight out the top, causing cracks. To avoid that, we let the shells rest, and that dries out the top of the shell so that when that air expands inside and wants to go out, it pushes the top up and the air goes out through the side, causing those macaron feet. So if your macarons crack in the oven, it's most likely due to them not resting long enough. My test to make sure that they have rested long enough is to touch the side of a macaron. Right now, because they're still wet, I get residue on my finger, but once they have totally dried, you'll be able to kind of run your finger lightly across the top and it won't leave any residue. And that's how you know that they're ready to go in the oven. If I preheat my oven right now, because I know that it only takes 20 to 30 minutes to preheat, I will have the perfect temperature by the time these are ready to go in. I couldn't tell you how long it's been because I've been cleaning up a little bit. I'm getting to the point where the macarons are almost ready. I can touch it, but I wouldn't be able to drag my fingertip very lightly across the top of it. So I'm gonna give them another couple of minutes to finish drying out. If you're still a beginner, this tray makes the best sacrificial tray because you'll only lose a handful of macaron shells as opposed to 30 if you use one of these. Okay, I can run my finger across the tops of these macarons without feeling any residue. It's not tacky at all and it feels really dry. So I'm gonna start with my sacrificial tray over here. These will have an extra few minutes to dry while these are in the oven, so I don't need this anymore. I like to bake my macarons one tray at a time in the lower third of my oven. I find that the trays with fewer macarons tend to bake a lot faster than the ones that are full of macarons, so I put this one in for 16 minutes. Normally I bake them for about 18 minutes per tray. All right, my macs have been in there for 5 minutes and I'm gonna peek to see if they cracked or not. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. Oh, they're beautiful. So if your first tray does not crack, it is highly unlikely that your second and third trays are going to crack. So it's pretty much smooth sailing at this point. One last thing before I pull these out of the oven, I recommend doing the dishes in 2 phases. I did them all at once here for simplicity, but it's kind of nice breaking them up into 2 batches to make you feel like there are less dishes to do overall. My silicone mats are dishwasher safe, so I often throw them in on the bottom rack where I put my plates. They can be a little tough to wrangle to make sure the dishwasher removes all the mac residue though, so you can also just wipe them down with a soapy sponge or rag if you prefer. The biggest cleaning tip I can give you is that it is a lot easier to wash the macaron batter from the bowl before it has dried on. If the meringue batter is still wet, it will pretty much rinse right off like you see here, and you don't have to scrub super hard to make sure that you've gotten everything. That'll save you a little time spent scrubbing over the sink, and if there's one thing that I want to be known for, it's that I'm all about helping you work smarter, not harder in the kitchen, and that includes cleanup. And then once we get towards the end of the time, I like to check to make sure they haven't browned too much. These look great. And now that I have one tray of beautiful macarons, I'm going to put one full tray in. They look so good. You'll see that the color has faded quite significantly, which is why it's important to overshoot the color. That is a term coined by one of my friends. Once you consistently get macarons down, feel free to try to experiment with red, black, and dark tones, but to start, pastel is usually the way to go. I'm gonna move these guys over to my stove, take an anxious little peek. We're doing good. And then I am going to bring my mixer back so that we can start on the buttercream. Okay. I'm gonna make a very simple American buttercream. Vanilla bean paste of honor again. Anytime I'm making American buttercream, I find that I get the fluffiest buttercream if I beat the butter by itself first. So that's what I'm gonna do here. This butter is so soft that I don't even know if that mattered. I'm gonna add in my powdered sugar. Go slow if you want to avoid the cloud, but otherwise it tastes really sweet right now. Now this is an occasion where you can measure with your heart. And once this all gets combined, I let it whip for another 3 to 4 minutes until it's light and fluffy. And scrape down the sides here. So I'm going to transfer it into my piping bag. Whoa! And again, scrape out your bowl so you can hardly tell you made something in it. Squeeze the top, twisting your batter down towards the bottom, and then we're ready to pipe. I'm gonna set that aside until my next batch of macarons comes out, and then I'm gonna start pairing them up so that we get the best looking macarons possible. Always important to wipe your counters down before you do this. My tray is fully cooled. That's really important because if they have not cooled fully, they can still be stuck to the parchment paper or the silicone mat. If they have cooled entirely, they're gonna be able to just pop off like that. Look at that. Like there's practically nothing holding them to it. So fun. I just start matching up similarly sized and pairing them together. You can see that this one's a little bit smaller than the one on the bottom, so I'll find one that looks a little bit smaller. Okay, there you have it. And look how clean this is. Always be mindful of where your thumbs are because they can easily crack a shell. And these look just as good. Yay! All right, last tray going in the oven. Last batch, beautiful. So, just turned off my oven and I'm gonna wait for them to cool before I start filling all of them. This is my cooled pan. And then if some of them feel a little stuck, you can peel them off of the mat. Just sometimes they stick a little bit. So this is the most fun part, is pairing them all together. I'm gonna be my new favorite little tool. Pop these guys off. Okay. And then pair them up. Okay, it looks like I could have baked that second tray for a little, like maybe another minute, because these bottoms are a lot more complete. Perfect. There we go. All right, I am ready to fill. So I've got my buttercream here. It's just about ready to come out at the top. You can use whatever piping tip you want. I'm using 2D right now. I love doing rosettes. I just start in the center and do a small swirl, making sure that it's smaller than the diameter of the macaron because it will press some of the filling out once you add that second sandwich cookie on top. Do a nice little swirl. And we've got just enough for all of these. With a little left over just in case you fill a couple with a little extra. And then we get onto the sandwiching, which I love to do. Pair them up and just lightly press down to make sure that there's contact across the entire top of the cookie. I do recommend maturing these in the fridge for about a day. The buttercream will help soften the shell. You'll get a really nice marinating of flavors. Sounds a little funny for a sandwich cookie, but it's true, I promise. You really can eat them anytime after assembly. I will not tell on you to the macaron police. Promise. There you have it, everything you need to know to make macarons in your kitchen. My name is Alyssa. I am the recipe developer, food photographer, and blogger behind the Floral Apron, where I share new recipes every single week. You can find them on my website at floralapron.com, and every single one has a cleanup rating so that you know exactly what you're getting into before you even start. If you have any questions about my method or equipment for macarons, leave a comment below. And if you try this recipe, please let me know how it goes because I love celebrating your successes with you or helping troubleshoot if needed. If this video was helpful to you, I'd really appreciate you giving it a thumbs up and considering subscribing. It goes a long way to support my little channel. My next video is going to be a full review of the Cuisinart Custom 14, so if you want to make sure you don't miss it, be sure to have your bell notifications turned on, and I will see you then. Bye! Perfect vanilla flavoring.